Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. Reports emerging that despite initial concerns at Mercedes around their new rear suspension on the W15, the performance was impressive at their Silverstone shakedown a few days ago and did provide the expected performance improvements they have been hoping for. Other teams though have been saying similarly, will this be enough to compete with the seemingly mighty RB20 of Red Bull? Hamilton, tweeting your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. Few updates around the paddock as well. Firstly on the Turkish Grand Prix. Been off the calendar now for a few years, famously of course where Lewis Hamilton wrapped up his 7th world title in 2020 among many other great Grand Prix, including the year after, which was dramatic in many ways. The Turkish Grand Prix though wants to return to the calendar in 2026. A tender is set to be launched at Istanbul Park by a Turkish government institution. There's so many places around the world right now that want their place on the calendar. I don't know how many more races they will add, whether they will remove some to bring some more back in, but Madrid is now in. There's talk about Chicago, there's talk about so many different cities, and of course really it would be nice to see us in South Africa back at Kyalami if that was to be possible. So at least then the calendar would cover all of the continents, but apparently the winning operator by this tender that has been launched will guarantee the return of the Turkish Grand Prix, or they'll face some penalties. So basically they're saying, look guys, someone come in and get us this done, or you're going to be getting fined pretty big time. So we'll see if that goes anyway. And Formula 1 I'm sure will have their thoughts on that. Formula 1 also have their thoughts on the Christian Horner allegations. This is quite the statement really that comes out today, just showing the intention from Formula 1 side that if the rumours are true, then the situation from their perspective is not tolerable. There's lots of talk about Liberty Media, just, American companies in general. Any sort of allegations such that Horner has been under have potentially severe repercussions for them as well. It's the same reason why Ford have come out and said to Red Bull, hey look, get your house in order or we're going to pull out of our partnership type thing. If the allegations against Horner are true, which we don't know, we'll see over time. But F1 say, we have noted that Red Bull have instigated an independent investigation into internal allegations at Red Bull Racing. We hope the matter will be clarified at the earliest opportunity after a fair and thorough process. We won't comment further at this time. So the rumour has it though that Red Bull, they do want to resolve this case quite quickly. There's rumours that even as early as tomorrow, they want to try and get this wrapped up ASAP. But given how things have been dragging on as of late, there are still some questions as to whether we are going to turn up in Bahrain testing, and we still don't have a resolution to this situation. By the way, in Bahrain, the teams are getting ready to go. This is the Red Bull pit wall. I don't really know why they've done it like this, but it is what it is. This is the Mercedes setup as well. So everyone's out there now getting ready to go because testing is this weekend. It's been a highly dramatic couple of weeks here in the Formula 1 world. That is set to continue. Testing coming up this weekend. The weekend after that is the first Grand Prix. The weekend after that is the second Grand Prix. There's a lot of Formula 1 finally back in action. So the teams are getting ready. The cars are ready. The drivers are ready as well. Fernando Alonso tweeted this out today. I am ready, with a load of emojis that you could read into as you feel free to. Not really sure where he's going with this one, but he's making it clear that Alonso believes he's in great positions to really deliver great results this year. Will he be able to top the 8 or so podiums he achieved last year? Well, possibly if the AMR24 is any good. I definitely think they've been aggressive with this concept, but they obviously they lost their way at the end of last year and they're hoping to find it again. This was noted though, that during a video that Aston Martin put out of the new car, have a look at this, they've actually blurred out the diffuser in the rear of the car because apparently they've cooked up something they don't want to give away. We'll quite often see this. The reveal cars, the launch cars they show are not necessarily the full packages. It's been the same story with Red Bull actually as well. For example, this is their launch car, the RB20, just compared to last year's RB or last year's W14, because there are some similarities. But the floor of the Red Bull, that's not going to be the floor they turn up with this season. It's not just going to be flat like this. But they don't want to show the floor. So quite often you'll see that McLaren, Red Bull, they will hide parts of their car at the launch spec, and obviously the rumour is that whatever we see here on the Red Bull is quite possibly not what we're going to be seeing on the Red Bull a few races into the season, if not directly in Bahrain for testing and beyond. So the teams always like to hide things, they always like to be somewhat misleading. There's also been talk as well about Mercedes front suspension, the fact that some of the images that they put up are maybe somewhat misleading. I think we tend to see this, right, that whatever pictures they put out and whatever car they reveal, is often intended deliberately to be somewhat misleading to other engineers that may get the wrong idea as to what they're trying to accomplish, and then a couple of weeks later we see what it is in reality. But Aston Martin must have something they think is worth hiding to, hide the diffuser from view of anybody else, or it's just a bit of a red herring. But I imagine there's probably something to this, and well, we'll see in Bahrain testing whether whatever they're doing back there is adding some degree of performance. Now Ferrari are in a similar boat. They're still testing things out actually at their testing they did the other day at Fiorano. We saw the numbers yesterday, which you have to take with a bit of a pinch of salt, of course, but apparently Leclerc's lap time this year in the SF24 was 8/10 faster than he did last year, also about this time. So that was worthy of note. But they were trying out multiple different shark fin geometries, as is quite eloquently described here, during those testing days. So, they're still not set 100% to what they want to do. We know that teams will bring further upgrades in the course of the season. And it definitely seems to me that based on what most of these teams are saying right now, there have been some major step forward made by a load of these teams. But if Red Bull, for example, have taken a step forward themselves, it will still be very challenging. But the feeling tends to be that this will be a more competitive season in some respects. Whether it's going to be more competitive right at the very front of the grid, that is another question entirely. But of course, Racing Bulls, as I'm probably going to call them still, are looking to get involved as well, and they were very optimistic about their performance of this new car when they tested it most recently. Now, Ricciardo, of course, wasn't in last year's AlphaTauri until towards the end of the year. Of course, it was Nick de Vries and Yuki Tsunoda to start off the season, but there was a report here from Autosport that actually the car handled particularly well. Of course, there's quite a lot of paint on this car compared to some of the other liveries, but as Tsunoda said, he already feels like the car, because they did their 200-kilometer, I'm pretty sure, shakedown at Misano. Now, the other teams haven't necessarily done this yet. I believe on the launch days, the shakedowns, they're only doing 15 kilometers or so. So basically 5 laps of Silverstone is what Hamilton and Russell would have done in the W15, and pretty much what Red Bull would have done as well. So likely they'll go to Bahrain and they'll do it there. So they get, the 200 Ks of testing before the actual testing weekend, which of course is coming up next weekend. So the AlphaTauri has done, okay, the Racing Bull has now done that at Misano, and as Tsunoda said, it feels great on the track. The first run with the V-Carb 01 went all smooth, said the 23-year-old Japanese driver, who stays on board for a 4th consecutive year, which is very rare to be fair, at this sister Red Bull team. I already felt a couple of steps of improvement compared to last year, and a really big step I felt compared to the same time last year, because of course, the AlphaTauri improved dramatically over the course of last season, to the point where at the end of the year, that AlphaTauri was arguably the 5th, 4th fastest car, something in that ballpark. They certainly weren't far off. Tsunoda had some great results at the end of the year, as of course did Lawson when he was briefly in the car, and Ricciardo in Mexico, let's not forget. So the package they had at the end of last season was very strong, and given everything they're taking from Red Bull, we're expecting them to get even stronger. So Yuki says the car's a big improvement compared to last year, and a massive improvement compared to the first spec of last year. So, he liked the new livery, etc, etc. I'd say overall it's an easier handling car, and I didn't feel any outstanding issue or strong characteristics and movements. So far, I'm feeling positive. So much optimism around Racing Bulls right now, and I think for very good reason. And I definitely think that Zach Brown is going to be hearing this, being, ready to pop a gasket, basically burst a gasket or whatever, because he's been roasting, and for good reason, I would say, in some parts, the whole Red Bull, RB, Racing Bulls, V-Carb relationship, and that is probably set to continue if the car is very strong, as it more than likely will be. Some more pictures as well, and some nice comparisons here between last year's Mercedes, this year's Mercedes, and obviously some very dramatic differences. But Red Bull have, of course, gone one step further, and they've made a very, let's say, aggressive evolution of their own car. And Newey did say that from what they experienced at Silverstone and their very brief shakedown, the car behaved as they expected it to. So basically, all teams are saying their cars worked as plans. They're very optimistic around the performance of the car, the improvements of the car, but of course Red Bull have nailed down the mechanical platform, the suspension. They've basically used Newey suspension design now for the last 2-3 years in a row. Other teams have only just got to a point where they apparently believe they have a respectable suspension. Of course, there'll be other innovations necessary if teams want to catch up to Red Bull. There's talk about Mercedes front wing and other ideas as well. But the main point with Mercedes, of course, is their approach to this year compared to previously. It's no secret over Lewis Hamilton must feel that Mercedes are not trending in the right direction as a team for him to decide to leave for Ferrari in 2025 after this season. Sure, this is his final go of things. Do I think this W15 is going to be better than last year's car and the year before? Almost certainly yes. But how does that paint it in terms of relevancy on the grid? Because, you can be P2, improve dramatically, and stay P2 if the other cars also move forward. So it seems Mercedes are taking a slightly less optimistic approach in terms of what they're saying outright to the public. I think the last couple of years, they talk a big game and they rarely delivered on that big game, to be honest. And now they're kind of keeping things slightly more under wraps. The analysis that Amos actually give here is that during their demo that they did, they were pretty stingy, as is described here on the photos. So they didn't reveal more than they intended to. Parts of the car they probably had, misleading renders of, for example. So Mercedes are definitely keeping expectations under control and keeping more things under wraps than might usually be expected to be the case. One thing that has been noted to have changed though, however, is the cockpit position. So it was a major complaint of Hamilton last year. He felt that he was so far forward in the car, and pretty much of all the cars, Hamilton and Russell, they were the furthest forward in terms of the cockpit position in the car. Hamilton felt like he couldn't feel the rear and have an understanding of what the car was doing, and therefore gain the confidence that he could in a car where he was slightly further rearwards. Now, James Allison said, yes, that's probably true to some degree, but if we just had a stronger rear end, which wasn't sliding around all over the place, then that wouldn't be so much of an issue. So I think they've gone both ways with this. They have addressed this issue. They've pushed the cockpit back by about 10 centimeters. So you guys can see, actually, the race talked about it the other day as well, that the cockpit has now gone back 10 centimeters or so, which is relatively significant. It's still going to be further forward, I believe, than Red Bull's is, but then again, that's the way Mercedes have decided to design it, and if they believe that the rear suspension is going to help the performance at the rear of the car, then Hamilton should be happier than he was previously. But again, it doesn't seem like they've absolutely, janked it back all the way as far as they could have done, and maybe this is another, part of Hamilton thinking, are they really listening to me or whatever? And I think they are listening to him, to be fair, but they have their other ideas as well. But the question is the car actually performing, right? Because all the other teams are saying, Ferrari, Racing Bulls, Red Bull, among others, that their car's performing as intended, they're making good steps, and they can't wait to hit the track in Bahrain to see if that's actually a reality. And Helmut Marko says that, if you look at Mercedes' front wing, it's clear that other teams have, come up with innovations and tricks and ideas to try and catch us up. But as Helmut Marko also said, last year they had the best car, so they expect to have the best car yet again. But this is a very interesting article, actually, that I'll link for you guys down below, discussing how Mercedes shakedown went and what performance improvements that they saw. So apparently there was some concern behind the scenes at Mercedes regarding their new rear suspension, because as I say, Red Bull have had their same rear suspension that Newey designs and their front suspension for the last 2 years, and they nailed it clearly, and now they've got that nailed down. They're looking to really add performance and downforce wherever they can. Mercedes, of course, want to retain high downforce, but they really need to nail the suspension so that they don't get any issues with the mechanical platform that they've suffered with badly for the last couple of years and was really the main cause of the porpoising back in 2022. But apparently there was some concern about whether they got it right or not. The necessary work developed over the winter to change the kinematics caused the vehicle dynamics group to spend many sleepless nights. Fortunately, from the information in our possession gleaned yesterday during the first seasonal outburst, basically the first time Mercedes taken to the track, they found the expected correlation, which had set off a small alarm bell in recent days. So whatever they were concerned about wasn't the case, and what they saw on track was what they expected to see in terms of the performance gains they were looking for. The rear axle responded positively, finally delivering the expected results. Of course, further checks will be necessary in Bahrain to corroborate the findings that they saw in Silverstone on, well, a rather wet day. So it may be difficult to read into everything, but the belief tends to be that the W15 performed as expected, responded positively to the changes that they were trying to see, and if it didn't respond positively, you might as well just chalk it up now, because the other teams are making progress, and if Mercedes were struggling day one, then it's, probably another year where they're going to be struggling to get on the podium. But for now, the brand new push rod rear suspension, which of course a big change to Mercedes that Aston Martin have employed as well, because they buy those components from Mercedes, that performed as expected. So, if they have made the progress they believe that they might have made, we'll see how the season goes. But Jake Dennis said, if you want to compete with Red Bull this year, you're going to have to gain a second of performance on a lap-by-lap basis. There's been rumours that Mercedes think they might have gained 5, 6 tenths, maybe slightly more than that. But anything more than that would be just such a mega jump that it's difficult to reasonably predict that to be the case. The only way that anyone competes with Red Bull, as far as I'm concerned, is if they've made some sort of error in their upgrades, which is probably not going to be the case. But very much interested in your thoughts in the comments below. Is this, positive correlation for Mercedes going to be enough to take them in the direction they need to be? We'll probably find out in Bahrain, realistically, either in testing or certainly when we get to the Grand Prix. And we'll see if Verstappen and Perez run away with it as they did last year. And we'll also see if Yuki Tsunoda and Daniel Ricciardo can be competitive, because I know there is some concern around the Formula 1 community that we might get to Bahrain and have a 1, 2, 3 for all Red Bull cars, which would maybe not paint the greatest picture. I don't expect that to happen, but I definitely think that RB Racing Bulls can, compete for 5th place in the Constructors, maybe even better than that. Just one final kind of interesting quote for you guys from Oscar Piastri here. I know why people compare this guy to Kimi sometimes, because he's pretty funny, he's pretty blunt, and well, he was asked the following question: wouldn't it be incredible if Hamilton was to win the title this year at Mercedes, get his 8th title, then go to Ferrari? And Oscar's like, no, it would not be incredible. What are you talking about? I think that Oscar Piastri winning his first world championship is a much better story with McLaren. So again, I haven't really mentioned McLaren that much in this video, but they have been arguably the most confident they've shown themselves to be in several years. Lando Norris was positively buzzing after the shakedown that they did at Silverstone. He seemed really confident. That car's moved dramatically in the right direction compared to a very competitive car at the end of last season. So that's exciting for McLaren as well. They themselves say they've got plenty of upgrades to bring, but Lando said that for sure this season he's finally going to win a race, which at least implies that they believe that they've done a good job over the winter. And if Lando thinks he's winning races, Piastri might think, you know what, why did I try and win the championship? But it's all going to start, of course, at these Grand Prix. So next weekend at Formula 1 testing. The week after that, Bahrain Grand Prix itself, 2nd of March. The weekend after that, Saudi Arabia, the 2nd Grand Prix of the season. Then a week off into Australia, the 3rd Grand Prix. Then another week off into Suzuka, which is very early in the season compared to normal. It will be, different time of the year, different climate possibly. Might not rain so much as it usually does at that circuit. Rumour has it that will possibly be the first track that teams will start to really bring the upgrades through. Red Bull's zero pods apparently potentially included. So very much interested in your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new as always. I'd greatly appreciate it. Nearly at 39,000 subs, I think. So thanks so much for the support over the last few days. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.